Mr. Sterling's voice cut through the rich air like a razor. It was sharp, cruel, and designed to make men shrink. "You understand, don't you?" he sneered, his cold reptilian eyes fixed on a young, trembling junior analyst named Mark. Mark's face was pale with fear. "This is a $500 million deal. The biggest in this company's history. The crowning jewel of my career. One tiny mistake, one misplaced word, one single, solitary error, and your career is dust. Not just dust, Mark. Ashes. You'll be scrubbing toilets on the street. Understand?" Maria, the cleaning lady, flinched hard. The harsh words seemed to echo not just in the opulent boardroom, but deep within her own tired soul. Her worn hands, red from detergents and years of scrubbing, gripped the handle of her industrial mop even tighter. She was just trying to disappear into the background, to become as unnoticed as the dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight. She polished the vast, gleaming marble floor of the executive boardroom, trying to be utterly invisible. Her life, her very livelihood, depended on it. Every morning, she entered these towering glass buildings, a world away from her small, cramped apartment, and worked silently, diligently. Her daughter, Sophia, a shy 16-year-old with a quiet strength, usually waited for her mother downstairs in the main lobby, diligently doing her homework. But today, Sophia's dentist appointment had been suddenly canceled. Maria had no choice but to bring her along. Sophia, with eyes too big and too observant for her quiet face, was carefully dusting a distant bookshelf, trying her absolute best to stay completely out of the way, to be utterly unseen. She knew her mother needed this job more than anything. This job put food on their table and a roof over their heads. Mr. Sterling, a man whose expensive custom-made suit looked tailor-made for cruelty, for showing off his vast power, slammed a thick, leather-bound contract onto the polished mahogany table. The loud thud times resonated through the high-ceilinged room, making Maria jump. "The final document," he announced, his voice dripping with self-importance, a sound that always made Maria's stomach churn. Flawlessly translated into perfect, precise Arabic for our esteemed Middle Eastern partners, every clause, every comma, meticulously checked. Just needs their signatures, and this company, My Times Company, becomes an absolute legend. We will rewrite the rules of global finance. He puffed out his chest, savoring the moment, his eyes glinting with triumphant greed. The air in the room felt thick with his arrogance. He reached for a pen, a solid gold instrument glinting under the dazzling crystal chandelier. It was a pen that probably cost more than Maria made in a month. His gaze swept the opulent room, briefly, dismissively, like he was surveying his kingdom. His eyes paused for only a fraction of a second on Maria, then flickered to Sophia. To him, they were nothing more than silent shadows, part of the furniture, less important than the expensive rugs that softened his footsteps. He didn't see people. He saw objects. He saw only reflections of his own power and success. Maria mumbled a desperate apology for being in the room at all, for daring to exist in his presence. "Almost done, sir," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, filled with a lifetime of apologies. She pushed her clunky cart, laden with buckets, sprays, and sponges, a little faster, the wheels squeaking faintly on the marble. Her face was flushed with embarrassment, wishing the floor would just swallow her whole. Sophia froze behind the bookshelf. Her heart hammered against her ribs, like a trapped bird trying to escape a cage. She knew she shouldn't stare. She knew she should look away, become invisible again. But as Mr. Sterling's heavy elbow, adorned with an expensive cufflink, nudged the vast document, a page flipped open, revealing a wall of dense text. Her eyes, quick and sharp, honed by hours of reading and observing the world from its quiet corners, caught a glimpse of the intricate, flowing Arabic script. Her grandmother, gone too soon, had taught her to read and write Arabic as a child. It was a secret language, a game they played, a bridge to a culture her mother had tried to leave behind, but which Sophia cherished. A sudden, cold dread washed over Sophia, tightening her stomach into a knot. Her breath hitched. Something was wrong, deeply, terribly wrong. The words on the page were familiar, yet twisted. A phrase, a single phrase, innocent to anyone else, but chillingly clear to her. It wasn't just a simple mistake. It was a clever, devious trick. But what could a quiet maid's daughter, a girl who barely spoke above a whisper, a girl whose presence was barely acknowledged, do against this powerful, terrifying titan of industry? Nothing. She was nobody. She was utterly powerless. Her mother's job, their entire future, hung by a thread. To speak out would be to invite disaster. But to stay silent felt like a betrayal of everything her grandmother had taught her, a betrayal of truth itself. But what Mr. Sterling, with all his immense money, all his terrifying power, and all his boundless arrogance, didn't know was this. The quiet, overlooked girl, diligently dusting a bookshelf, had just spotted something no one else could, something hidden in plain sight. A poisonous seed planted within the very heart of his half-billion-dollar dream. It was more than just a mistake. It was a deadly trap. A trap designed to ensnare him, to steal everything he believed he was about to gain, to turn his triumph into a spectacular downfall. And in just a few heart-stopping moments, this shy maid's daughter, this girl who everyone ignored, this quiet observer, would unleash a truth. A truth that would not only shatter his half-billion-dollar deal into 1,000 pieces but bring his entire world, his entire carefully constructed empire of pride and greed, crashing down around his arrogant ears. She would prove that true power isn't about money or title, but about integrity and a sharp, observant mind, even if it comes from the most unexpected, underestimated place. This was a battle between good and evil, and the underdog was about to strike. The deal was set to be signed in precisely 1 hour. The Middle Eastern delegates, led by the stern, silver-haired Sheikh Tariq al-Hamad, were due to arrive any minute. The tension in the boardroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mr. Sterling paced like a caged tiger, barking orders into his phone, his voice sharp and demanding. Junior analysts scurried, their faces etched with fear, making last-minute adjustments to presentations that Mr. Sterling would likely ignore anyway. Maria, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and dread for her daughter, finished polishing the grand table. She quickly pushed her cart towards the double doors, Sophia trailing silently behind her. As they reached the exit, Sophia glanced back at the contract still lying open on the table, a silent scream trapped in her throat. The Arabic words seemed to mock her, a dangerous secret only she understood. "Mama," Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible. I saw something." Maria stopped, her back still to the door. Her shoulders slumped. "Sophia, please, not now. We need to leave." Mr. Sterling is already in a foul mood. She didn't turn around, afraid of drawing any more attention to themselves. She knew too well what Mr. Sterling was like when he was angry. He was a force of nature, a hurricane of fury. "But Mama, it's important," Sophia insisted, her voice gaining a tiny tremor of urgency. "The contract, the Arabic part, there's a mistake, a big one." Maria finally turned, her eyes wide with alarm. She looked quickly around the empty hall, checking for anyone who might overhear. "Mistake? What are you talking about?" They said it was perfectly translated. She remembered Mr. Sterling's boastful words just moments before. Every clause, every comma, meticulously checked. "No, Mama, it's not just a mistake. It's a trick," Sophia explained, her voice low and serious. "The clause about ownership. It's written in a way that looks like a standard agreement, but with a slight change in a single word. It changes shared management to sole control in a very specific situation, a situation that sounds harmless but isn't. Maria stared at her daughter, her mind reeling. Sophia had always been bright, incredibly intelligent, but also so incredibly shy. How could she, a teenager, have caught something that a team of highly paid lawyers and translators had missed? And why did this sound so dangerous? Sole control? What does that mean, honey? Sophia's explanation was simple, but terrifying. It means that if the initial investment isn't paid back within exactly 6 months, the entire project, all the assets, the land, the patents, everything would automatically transfer to the Middle Eastern partners, completely, with no further negotiation. Not just shared control, but sole times control. It's hidden in a very obscure old dialect phrase that sounds very similar to the modern legal term for shared ownership. Maria gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. She knew Mr. Sterling. She knew his desperate need for this deal. He wouldn't notice a tiny, ancient linguistic trick. He just wanted the money. And this kind of trick was exactly the kind of thing he'd pull on someone else. But now it was being pulled on him. Are you certain, Sophia? Maria whispered, her eyes wide with terror. This is enormous. This could destroy everything. Sophia nodded, her face grim. I'm certain, Mama. My grandmother taught me that old dialect. She said it was important to know the roots of our language. She used to tell me stories about how language could be used to hide truth and to reveal it. Maria looked back at the boardroom doors, then at her daughter, a child who saw the world with an uncommon clarity. Her heart was a battleground of fear and a growing, desperate hope. What if Sophia was right? What if this brilliant, quiet girl had truly uncovered a betrayal that no one else had seen? The stakes were astronomical. If she said nothing, Mr. Sterling could lose everything. If she spoke up, and Sophia was wrong, Maria would lose her job, and they would lose their home. Their lives would be ruined. Could she really risk everything on a hunch from her shy, quiet daughter? Maria's mind raced. Fear battled with a fierce maternal instinct. She trusted Sophia. She had to. But how? How could a cleaning lady and her daughter possibly get anyone to listen, especially someone as arrogant and dismissive as Mr. Sterling? It was an impossible situation. Mama, Sophia urged, her eyes pleading. We have to tell someone. It's not just a business deal. It's wrong. Maria looked at her daughter's earnest face, and a sliver of courage ignited within her. Sophia was right. This was about more than just money. It was about integrity, about preventing a monumental injustice. But who? She couldn't go directly to Mr. Sterling. He would laugh in her face, then fire her on the spot. He saw her as dirt. Then, a thought sparked. Mark. The young junior analyst Mr. Sterling had just humiliated. He looked terrified, but also like he had a shred of decency left. He was the least powerful person in the room, besides them. Perhaps he would be the most open to listening. Stay here, Sophia, Maria instructed, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. Wait by the emergency exit. Don't move. I'll be right back. Maria took a deep breath, her heart pounding against her ribs, and pushed her cleaning cart back towards the boardroom. She could see Mark still hovering nervously by the conference table, meticulously arranging pens that were already perfectly aligned. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. Excuse me, sir, Maria whispered, approaching Mark. Her voice was barely audible over the hum of the air conditioning. Mark jumped, startled. He turned to face her, his eyes wide. Oh, Maria, is everything all right? He was one of the few employees who even knew her name. Mr. Mark, Maria began, choosing her words carefully. I know this sounds impossible, but my daughter, she noticed something in the contract. Mark frowned, his brow furrowing with confusion and a hint of impatience. The contract? Maria, I appreciate your diligence, but the legal team has been over that document with a fine-tooth comb. It's perfect. It has to be. He looked nervously towards Mr. Sterling, who was now engaged in an intense phone call, his back to them. No, sir, it's not about English, Maria explained, her voice gaining a desperate urgency. It's in the Arabic translation. My daughter, Sophia, she speaks an old dialect. She says there's a word, a phrase, that changes the entire meaning of the ownership clause. Mark stared at her, utterly bewildered. Your daughter speaks old Arabic dialect? Maria, I don't understand. Are you saying our professional translators, our highly paid legal experts, missed something? He gave a small, incredulous laugh, but it was quickly stifled by fear. He knew Mr. Sterling's wrath. Yes, sir, Maria affirmed, her gaze unwavering. She says it turns shared management into sole control for the partners if the initial investment isn't repaid in 6 months. It's a trick, a very clever, ancient trick. Mark's jaw dropped. The playful skepticism vanished, replaced by genuine shock. He knew the terms of the deal intimately. A sole control clause? That would be disastrous. That would be corporate suicide. He looked from Maria's earnest face to the formidable contract on the table. He swallowed hard. The implications were staggering. If Maria was right, this wasn't just a mistake, it was a deliberate, predatory move. And if he failed to act, *He Times would be the one blamed. His career would be over, just as Mr. Sterling had promised. Show me, Mark demanded, his voice now a desperate whisper. Where is it? Can she show me? He was clearly terrified, but a glimmer of intellectual curiosity, and perhaps a desperate need to save his own skin, was battling with his fear. Would he trust the word of a cleaning lady's daughter over a team of experts? Would he risk Mr. Sterling's fury for a long shot? The clock was ticking. The delegates were minutes away. Maria nodded quickly, relief washing over her that Mark hadn't dismissed them outright. Yes, sir. She can show you. She's just outside. Mark hesitated for only a second, glancing over his shoulder at Mr. Sterling, who was still fuming on the phone. The CEO's back was turned, a small window of opportunity. He knew this was an insane risk. If this was a baseless claim, his career was absolutely finished. But if it was true, it meant preventing a catastrophe, and maybe, just maybe, earning some respect, or at least, saving himself from unemployment. He made a snap decision. Bring her in, quickly, Mark whispered, his voice tense with urgency. But be discreet. If Mr. Sterling sees her touching the contract, we're all dead. Maria rushed out of the boardroom and returned a moment later with Sophia. Sophia's face was pale, her eyes darting nervously around the luxurious room. This was completely outside her comfort zone. Her mother gave her a reassuring squeeze on the arm. Sophia, show Mr. Mark, Maria urged gently, gesturing towards the contract spread across the table. Sophia approached the table hesitantly, her small hand trembling slightly as she pointed to a specific paragraph. It's here, sir, she said, her voice soft but surprisingly clear. In this clause, about the repayment period, she traced a finger across the complex script. The word for shared, musharaka, is subtly altered. See these 2 tiny marks? She pointed to almost invisible flourishes. They change it to times Istiklal *. It sounds similar, but it means exclusive independence or sole control in the old legal texts. Especially when paired with this phrase here, regarding unfulfilled obligation. Mark leaned in close, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't understand Arabic, but he could see the intricate differences Sophia was pointing out. He pulled out his phone, snapped a quick photo of the relevant section. Can you write out the exact words? Both the correct and incorrect versions and what they mean? He asked, his mind racing. And explain the specific conditions under which sole control would apply. Sophia quickly and carefully wrote down the phrases on a notepad Maria always carried for making notes about her cleaning tasks. Her handwriting was neat and precise, just like her observations. She explained again, clearly, that if the initial investment wasn't repaid within 6 months, the entire project, all its assets, would automatically become the sole property of the Middle Eastern partners, with no recourse. No appeals, no arbitration, no shared ownership, complete takeover. Mark's face went white. The gravity of the situation slammed into him. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a deliberate, cunning act of corporate piracy. The Middle Eastern partners would fund the project, wait 6 months, and if the global economy dipped, or if Mr. Sterling's projected returns didn't materialize exactly on time, they would simply claim everything. $500 million, gone. The company, ruined. And Mr. Sterling, humiliated and stripped of his empire. The man who prided himself on his sharp business acumen was about to be utterly outsmarted by a linguistic trap. He looked at Sophia, a sudden, profound respect dawning in his eyes. This quiet girl, invisible to most, had seen what no one else had. She had saved them, but now came the hardest part, convincing Mr. Sterling. The delegates were due to walk through the doors any second. Mark knew he had to act fast. But how do you tell the most powerful man in the room that he's been duped, and that the only person who caught it was a cleaning lady's daughter? The answer was, you don't. Not directly. Not if you want to keep your job or your life. He needed an angle, a way to present this devastating truth without making Mr. Sterling feel entirely foolish. Could he do it? Could he deliver this news without triggering an explosion of Sterling's infamous temper? The clock was ticking louder now. Every second counted. The elegant double doors of the boardroom swung open with a soft sigh. Sheikh Tariq al-Hamad entered, a man of imposing stature and calm, intelligent eyes, flanked by his 2 key advisors. Their rich, traditional attire stood out against the modern corporate setting. Mr. Sterling, ever the showman, straightened his tie, a wide, confident smile plastered on his face. Sheikh al-Hamad, welcome, a historic day indeed, he boomed, extending a hand. As Mr. Sterling exchanged pleasantries, Mark's heart hammered. He knew he had only a few precious minutes before the contract was presented for signing. He quickly motioned for Maria and Sophia to wait just outside the door. He had to handle this alone. He had to find a way. He approached Mr. Sterling, trying to appear calm, but his hands were clammy. Mr. Sterling, he began, his voice a little too high. A moment, if you please, before we proceed. Mr. Sterling turned, his smile instantly freezing. His eyes narrowed, a clear warning. Now, Mark, is not the time for jitters. Everything is perfect. Do not embarrass me. His tone was low, menacing. No, sir, it's not jitters, Mark insisted, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. It's a minor linguistic nuance. Our legal team, in their pursuit of absolute perfection, asked me to double-check one extremely subtle point with an external consultant. Just a final check, you understand. An abundance of caution. He hoped the lie sounded believable enough. He could almost feel Mr. Sterling's gaze burning through him. Sterling's eyes flickered from Mark to the sheikh, who was now settling into his chair, a faint, polite smile on his face. He hated delays. He hated anything that wasn't perfect. But the idea of absolute perfection and abundance of caution appealed to his ego. He liked the idea that he was so thorough, so beyond reproach. Nuance? Mr. Sterling scoffed, but there was a hint of curiosity in his voice. What nuance? Our translation team is the best in the business. Indeed, sir, they are. Mark agreed quickly, nodding enthusiastically. But this particular point involves an archaic dialect phrase, one that sounds almost identical to the modern term for shared management, but in very specific old legal contexts, it implies sole control if certain conditions aren't met. It's a relic, really. Extremely rare, but still occasionally used in some very traditional legal circles. Mark tried to sound scholarly, authoritative, like he was presenting a fascinating, obscure detail, not a ticking time bomb. Sterling scoffed again, but his interest was piqued. Sole control? You're telling me this document, reviewed by a dozen lawyers, has a hidden clause for sole control because of a dialect? He still looked skeptical, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and the fear of being seen as foolish by the sheikh was a powerful motivator. The idea that his team might have missed something times subtle, so times intellectually challenging, that only he or his hand-picked junior analyst could detect it, appealed to his vanity. Only in very specific circumstances, sir, and it's so minute, almost invisible, Mark said, playing into Sterling's ego. Most modern translators wouldn't catch it. It requires a specialist in ancient legal Arabic to truly appreciate the subtlety. I only brought it up because I knew you, sir, would demand nothing less than absolute, indisputable clarity. Mr. Sterling looked from Mark to the sheikh, who was now waiting patiently, observing the exchange. He imagined the sheikh, with his deep knowledge of ancient culture, potentially understanding this nuance and seeing Sterling as sloppy for missing it. The thought made his blood run cold. He couldn't afford to look anything less than brilliant. "Show me," Mr. Sterling demanded, his voice now lower, tinged with a dangerous mix of anger and genuine concern. He snatched the notepad with Sophia's careful writing. "Show me exactly where this *relic times is." He knew he was taking a risk by delaying the signing, but the thought of being blindsided, of being outmaneuvered, was far worse than any brief inconvenience. Could this young, terrified analyst actually be right? Could he be saving Sterling from a catastrophic error? A cold sweat broke out on Sterling's forehead. He needed to know. Now. Mark quickly retrieved the contract. He pointed to the specific clause, his finger tracing Sophia's marks. "Here, sir. You see these 2-minute dots over this character, and the elongation of this final stroke?" He tried to sound completely knowledgeable, hoping his bluff would hold. In modern Arabic, it's a stylistic flourish, harmless, but in the ancient legal script, it denotes a possessive shift. Specifically, a shift from shared to exclusive. And combined with the phrase unfulfilled obligation nearby, it forms a complete binding clause for sole ownership. Mr. Sterling leaned in, squinting at the Benerard page. He couldn't read Arabic, but he could see the tiny, almost imperceptible differences Mark was highlighting. He cross-referenced it with Sophia's neatly written comparison on the notepad. The subtle visual distinction was undeniable. The fear was now palpable on his face, replacing his arrogance. He didn't want to admit his ignorance, but the evidence, pointed out by his own nervous junior analyst, was staring him in the face. "Unfulfilled obligation?" Sterling muttered, reading Sophia's note. "The 6-month repayment clause. So if the investment isn't paid back precisely on time, they take everything?" "Precisely, sir," Mark confirmed, his voice a steady whisper now. He was gaining confidence, seeing that Mr. Sterling was finally grasping the true horror of the situation. No appeals, no negotiation, no shared assets. Total transfer of all project components, including future patents, directly to their ownership. It's a complete takeover mechanism, hidden as a minor linguistic quirk. Sterling's eyes snapped up, looking at the sheikh, who was watching them with an unnervingly serene expression. A cold wave of understanding washed over Sterling. He suddenly saw the Sheikh's polite smile not as a sign of respect, but as a predator's patience. The Sheikh hadn't cared about the delay. He was waiting for Sterling to sign his own financial death warrant. "My God," Sterling breathed, the color draining from his face. "They tried to trick me. They tried to steal my company." His voice was a low growl, filled with a mixture of terror and white-hot rage. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate fear of humiliation and ruin. He spun around, slamming his fist onto the table, making the glasses jump. "Get our legal team on the line, immediately! I want to know how this was missed! Every single one of them will be fired!" His voice thundered, shaking the room. The Sheikh remained outwardly calm, but a flicker of something disappointment, perhaps, or a subtle acknowledgement of Sterling's belated realization crossed his face. He simply watched, his expression unreadable. Mark, seizing the moment, spoke up. "Sir, with all due respect, our legal team wouldn't necessarily be fluent in ancient legal Arabic dialects. This is a highly specialized linguistic trap. It's designed to be missed by conventional translation." He was subtly defending the team, but more importantly, framing Sophia's discovery as incredibly rare and impressive. Sterling glared at him, then back at the contract. The $500 million deal, his life's work, was moments away from becoming a $500 million disaster. The signing pens were on the table. The delegates were waiting. He still needed this deal, but not if it meant corporate suicide. "What do we do?" he demanded, looking at Mark, a desperate plea in his eyes that Mark had never expected to see. The great Mr. Sterling, reduced to asking for help from a junior analyst, all because of a maid's daughter. Mark took another deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. "Sir, we need to renegotiate that specific clause, immediately, and we need to ensure an independent expert translation is done in front of the Sheikh, highlighting the specific change. We must demonstrate we are aware of the trick without accusing them directly." He knew it was a delicate dance. He also knew who the real expert was. He glanced towards the door. It was time to bring in the silent hero. Could he convince Sterling to swallow his pride completely? To admit, even silently, that he had been saved by an unexpected source? The future of the entire company hung in the balance. Mr. Sterling's face was a mask of conflicting emotions: fury, embarrassment, and a dawning, grudging respect for Mark's quick thinking. But more than anything, a desperate urgency. He couldn't lose this deal, not entirely. But he couldn't sign a death warrant either. "An independent expert?" Sterling barked. "Where do we find one at this exact moment? The Sheikh is sitting right there, waiting. He'll walk away if we delay too long." His eyes darted nervously between the contract and the patiently waiting delegates. Mark knew this was the hardest part. He had to be bold. He had to champion Sophia. "Sir," he began, his voice steady, "the expert is right outside. She's the one who found it." Sterling stared at him, bewildered. "What are you talking about? Who? What expert?" "Sophia, sir. Maria's daughter," Mark said, nodding towards the door. "She learned the ancient dialect from her grandmother. She saw the nuance immediately. She can explain it to the Sheikh, in person, with the document in front of them." A ripple of shock went through Sterling. His jaw tightened. To admit a cleaning lady's daughter had saved him, the humiliation would be unbearable. But the alternative, corporate ruin, was worse. He looked at the contract again, then at the Sheikh. The Sheikh was watching, a faint, almost imperceptible tilt to his head. He knew. Sterling could feel it. The Sheikh knew times they had detected the trap. The game was up. Delay was no longer an option. He had to act. He had to show strength, even if it meant swallowing his pride. "Bring her in," Sterling finally ground out, his voice barely a whisper, thick with reluctant acceptance. But if she makes one mistake, Mark, one single mistake. His threat hung heavy in the air. Mark didn't wait. He rushed to the door and returned with Maria and Sophia. Maria's face was etched with terror. Sophia, usually so shy, held her head high, a quiet determination in her eyes. This was her chance. This was her truth. Mr. Sterling, surprisingly, didn't look at Maria. His gaze was fixed on Sophia. "Young lady," he said, his voice clipped, "my junior analyst tells me you found a discrepancy in the Arabic. Explain it. To the sheikh." He waved a hand towards the delegates' table. Sophia walked forward, her small stature almost swallowed by the vast, intimidating boardroom. She approached the sheikh, bowing slightly, respectfully. Her Arabic, when she spoke, was clear, articulate, and carried the melodic nuances of the ancient dialect. "Honored Sheikh Al-Hamad," Sophia began, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I apologize for this intrusion, but in the spirit of absolute clarity and good faith, there is a subtle but significant linguistic point in the contract that I believe warrants your attention." She then proceeded to explain, calmly and precisely, the difference between times, musharaka times, shared management, and times istiqlal times, sole control, pointing to the minute graphical distinctions on the page. She explained how, in ancient legal texts, these tiny marks could transform the meaning, especially when coupled with the clause regarding unfulfilled obligation within 6 months. She spoke of her grandmother's teachings, of the importance of accuracy and integrity in language. The sheikh listened intently, his expression unreadable. His advisors, initially surprised, leaned forward, their faces growing serious. As Sophia finished, there was a hushed silence in the room. Then, the sheikh's senior advisor spoke rapidly in Arabic to Sheikh Al-Hamad. The sheikh nodded slowly, then turned to Sophia. "Your grasp of the ancient legal dialect is exceptional, young lady," Sheikh Al-Hamad said, his voice deep and resonant. He spoke in perfect English, his eyes meeting Sophia's. "And your honesty is refreshing." He then turned his gaze to Mr. Sterling, a slight smile finally touching his lips. It was a smile that conveyed a complex message. Asterisk, "We tried. You caught it." "Well played." Asterisk, Mr. Sterling's face was pale. The jig was truly up, the trap exposed. But because of Sophia's clear, respectful explanation and Mark's quick thinking, it hadn't turned into an outright confrontation. It had been handled with a strange kind of grace, avoiding direct accusation. "We will, of course, rectify this immediately, Mr." Sterling announced, his voice still tight with tension but now laced with a forced magnanimity. "My team will prepare an addendum for explicit clarification, ensuring shared management under all conditions. And we'll have an independent linguist, an expert like Sophia, verify every detail." He shot a quick, almost imperceptible glance at Sophia, a look that was a mixture of residual irritation and profound relief. He was saved. But by whom? The irony was thick. He had been so close to disaster, and the quiet girl he had ignored had pulled him back from the brink. The $500 million deal, now back on track, was no longer just his triumph. It was Sophia's, too. The tension in the boardroom slowly eased. Mr. Sterling, though visibly shaken and humiliated by the close call, saw his $500 million deal salvaged. The sheikh, acknowledging Sophia's extraordinary brilliance and honesty, agreed to a new, explicitly clear clause. The contract was quickly amended. A new, untainted version, ensuring shared management and mutual benefit for both parties, was signed. Mr. Sterling had been brought to the very brink of ruin by his own arrogance and short-sightedness, and he had been saved by the most unlikely of saviors. He never again dismissed Maria or Sophia as mere shadows. In fact, he was forced to grudgingly acknowledge Sophia's sharp mind and exceptional skill. Within weeks, Sophia was offered a full scholarship for advanced language studies, personally funded by Mr. Sterling's company. Maria, her dedication and loyalty finally recognized, was promoted to a supervisory role, overseeing all corporate services. Mark, the junior analyst who had dared to listen and stand up, was quickly promoted, his career now skyrocketing. The antagonist, the cunningly hidden linguistic trap, was defeated. It wasn't defeated by force or by money, but by the quiet power of specialized knowledge and unwavering integrity. It was a clear victory for the underdog, a resounding triumph of virtue over insidious deception. The world learned a powerful lesson that day. True value, true brilliance, often hides where you least expect it in the sharp mind of a quiet, unassuming girl. This incredible story reminds us that true genius often goes unnoticed, residing in places and people we thoughtlessly overlook. It teaches us that listening to the quiet voices, those often dismissed as unimportant, can avert disaster and unlock incredible, world-changing potential. What unique, often underestimated skill do you possess? What hidden talent might you have that the world desperately needs to see, just like Sophia's? Think about it. We all have something special within us, something powerful that can make a real difference. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. If this story inspired you to believe in the power of unexpected heroes, then share your own stories of hidden talents or times you spoke up against injustice in the comments below. Like this video if you believe true strength often comes from the most unexpected places, and subscribe for more incredible stories of people who changed the world, one quiet act of courage at a time.